Thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk. And in this episode of God Talk, I want to explore an interesting situation that is far too common in people. And I don't fully understand it, but kind of had a realization yesterday that was kind of put it in maybe better focus in my own mind. So I wanted to explore it in this episode of God Talk. But I want to talk about why people are unwilling oftentimes to do things to improve their lives, to make it better. Why are people stuck in bad situations? Why are people stuck in abusive situations? Why are people stuck in dysfunctional situations? Like when we're in a negative situation, why aren't we willing to do the work to improve that? And I think we all know of someone that's in a situation like that. People who maybe they're in a marriage in which they're treated very poorly by their spouse. Maybe their spouse abuses them. Maybe they're unfaithful, and the person just keeps tolerating it, and you're like, why do you let them treat you like this? Or maybe it's someone that we know that like is in a bad situation in terms of their health, and they could do something about it. Maybe they're significantly overweight and it's causing congestive heart failure, and if they don't like take better care of themselves, they're gonna die an early death. But they don't do anything about it. Like what is it that makes us at times unwilling to make the changes in our lives to have a better life, a more healthy life, a less dysfunctional life? And I think this is a big part of it. And I'm hoping this speaks to some of you that are listening to the podcast today. Is sometimes we're unwilling to deal with pain before we're able to make things better. I guess what I mean, said that kind of poorly. Sometimes before things can get better, we have to, sometimes it's got to get worse. You can think about like someone that has a wound that won't heal. Sometimes like the skin dies where you have an injury and wounds won't heal. And then they've got to literally like scrape the wound, get rid of all of the dying necrotic like skin tissue, get down to healthy skin tissue so that the wound can heal properly. Now, I'm here to tell you, like, I've never had it done, but it does not sound fun. And so the mindset is like, you know what? It's going to hurt too bad to scrape away all the unhealthy dying tissue that I would rather deal with this wound not healing right, infection and all of these other things, than I have to deal with the pain of like having that done. I remember my dad when he had I can't remember if it was triple or quadruple bypass surgery. They had to break his rib cage, and my dad, like, he never showed pain. He never said anything hurt. If my dad said something hurt, like I remember one time he came to visit and his right hand was like triple the size of the other one because he had rheumatoid arthritis, and like, Dad, what is going on? Doesn't that hurt? It's like, yeah, a little bit. It was just my dad. But I remember after like seeing him right after he woke up after his open heart surgery and they cracked his rib cage, he just let out this moan and basically said, never again. So that would be another example. Like, you know, are you willing to have your rib cage cracked open, to have your arteries cleared out so that you can live another 30 years of healthy life, or are you not willing to do that and you're probably going to die of a heart attack in the next 6 months to 2 years? It's just, once again, an interesting phenomenon is why people won't do the difficult things to make their life better in the long run. So as I was pondering that, mainly because in my counseling and different things I do as a pastor, I ponder why people react and act a certain way. I'm somewhat interested in just like what makes the mind tick and makes it work. It's just so different in all different kinds of people. But you know what came to my mind is a biblical story. And that biblical story is the story of the people of Israel during the time of the Exodus. And I have to tell you, like, it never dawned on me before. When we think about, after they saw all the miracles of God, like I never fully understood it. Like they saw the parting of the Red Sea, they saw the plagues in Egypt, um, and and all the miracles of God, and God promised them to enter into the promised land, the land flowing of milk and honey. And rather than just going in, they sent these spies into the land, one from each tribe. So there were 12 spies for the 12 tribes. They go into the land of milk and honey, the land of Canaan. And they come back and they're like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. The fruit, grapes, they have to carry them on poles between two people. They're so big. It's lush. It's beautiful. But giants live there, descendants of the Nephilim, like people that are way bigger than us. We're going to be squashed like ants if we go in. And so that's what 10 of the 12 spies said. Two of them said, you know what, God's with us. We can do whatever. We've seen his majesty. We've seen his glory. God is faithful, and things will turn out. We need to go into the land. But listen, 80% of the spies and 80% of the people said, no way, not going. So the people of Israel didn't go into the land, and then they had to wander in the desert for 40 years before their children had the chance to go into the land. And it always kind of like how's it happen? How do you see the waters part? You walk on dry land, and they close in on your enemy. Moses is up Mount Sinai. He comes down with the 10 Commandments. His face is glowing because he's talked to God. How are you scared to take possession of the promised land? It doesn't seem real. And so that's always how I looked at that passage. But you know what? I think that's not what it's about at all. I don't think it's that they doubted that they could take possession of the land. I think they were scared. They were scared because they knew that to take possession of the land and to receive the benefit of the promised land, the land flowing of milk and honey, not that that's not going to happen, but the pain that they would undergo before they could receive that blessing, that was more than what they were willing to do. Just like, take it to the analogy of the person that's, got a wound that won't heal. They're going to just pretend they don't have a problem. Not that they don't believe that maybe by doing what the doctors say, like it'll heal quicker or it'll heal better, but they don't want to go through the pain. That they're not willing to cross over pain to get to a better life. That's got to be. I mean, with all that the people of Israel saw before they came to the land of the giants, it's not that they doubted God, but the reality is that some were going to die. Some dads were going to go out to battle and not come home to their kids. So, some husbands weren't going to come home to their spouses, and they were afraid because what if they don't come home? And maybe it's better just kind of wandering in the desert. Maybe it's better going back to Egypt than to have to deal with that pain of potentially losing your life in battle, so that ultimately you could take possession of a far better, greater land that God was promising. Interestingly enough, their kids, the next generation, did not have the same issue. Why? Because they spent 40 years wandering around in the desert. They spent 40 years eating flakes of bread that were forming on the ground. And that's what they ate day in and day out, 7 days a week for 40 years. God would throw in some occasional meat. Oftentimes they didn't have the water they wanted. You're not showering. You're waking up feeling dirty all the time. It sucked. It sucked so bad that For them, there wasn't that kind of trade-off when they were standing at the entrance of the promised land. Anything's better than this. So what do I have to lose? YOLO, right? You only live once. Boom. And then they went and they did it. But I think when we have something to lose, when something's going to get worse, because it's bad, it could be worse. It can always be worse. It's not horrible. But I think that's when we're unwilling to make the change. And so you have, once again, people, we know people like this that are in a very dysfunctional marriage. And listen, I'm not promoting divorce. God speaks very harshly against divorce. He does give permission for unfaithfulness. I can't imagine that God's got a problem with if you're being abused. And we know people who continue to live in that. And the question is why? And the reality is even in that dysfunction, maybe the person's got a roof over their head. Maybe the bills are being paid. Maybe they're only abusive 10% of the time, or they're drunks 30% of the time, or maybe they just don't come home one night a week, but 6 nights a week they do come home, and you know where they're at, and you feel somewhat safe and secure. You get to see your kids every day versus maybe only half the time. You see all these things come into play, and they hold us back from moving forward and doing what can get us out of that dysfunction. And that getting out of the dysfunction doesn't necessarily mean divorce. It can mean, listen, I love you, but I'm not going to let you treat me this way. So, we're going to live separate for a period of time. And if you love me enough, you're going to change how you're treating me. I'm once again not advocating divorce, but I'm not advocating living in dysfunction. And sometimes I rub my head as to why people are willing to do that. But you do stand to lose something if you do that. Because if you say that, hey, I'm moving out until like you can treat me right or something like that, like all of a sudden that's going to destabilize the relationship. Maybe they're going to be a jerk. Maybe they're going to get a lawyer. Maybe they're going to try to take the kids from you, or at least part of the time. And you have all these other things that are going to hold you back. Now, the reality is if you kind of bite the stick while the bullet's being dug out, right? So that would be another example. Someone gets shot by a bullet in the olden days. There's no hospital nearby. They give you a stick to chew on. They heat up a knife in a fire. They dig it out, and then they sear your skin closed, right? That can't be enjoyable. It's be like, no, leave the bullet in. But if you get it out, 5 months from now, 5 years from now, it's going to be better. All right, so let's apply that to our work. Maybe it's not marriage that you're dealing with like that, but maybe it's your job. Maybe you're in a very dysfunctional situation with your job. Maybe you're being abused in your job, and how they're treating you and how they're working you. Maybe you deal with racism. Maybe you deal with reverse racism. Maybe you deal with religious persecution. Maybe you're being significantly underpaid for what it is that you're doing and what it is you're worth. And the question is why aren't you willing to do something about it? And the answer is, well, because the job market's not great right now. At least I've got a job. And so I'm afraid of the unknown of like trying to change jobs or find another job. The enemy I know is better than the enemy that I don't know type thing. And so you're staying in it. Maybe it's your health. And listen, your health could significantly improve your cholesterol or your blood pressure or your diabetes if you just change your diet. But you're like, I don't want to change my diet. I like to eat this way. I'm used to eating this way. Well, you know what? It's going to be a period of time. It's going to suck. Your body's going to go through withdrawals when it's not getting a certain type of food that you're used to. But it will readjust, and you'll learn to like the newer food. Maybe it's exercise, and maybe it's stop smoking. Oh, the withdrawals of stop smoking. I'm sure it's miserable, but you come out on the other side of that, and you know what? You're going to feel pretty good about yourself, and and you'll be a better, healthier person. Someone who's an alcoholic, I mean, they've got to be dried out. My dad was that way a couple different times. He had to dry out because he was going in for surgery, and they have to do that carefully. That in of itself can kill you as you experience those withdrawals. And so maybe you're just not willing to go through that, and you just think it's easier to try to control your drinking. The applications to this is limitless. But it was a revelation to me as I'm counseling different people and dealing with different situations. And I'm hearing how painful it is for those who are trying to walk through some of these changes, that it has to almost always get worse before it gets better, unless it's absolutely horrible in every way, shape, and form. If there's some good in some situation, if there's 15, 20% good and 80% bad, then you're very likely it's going to have to get worse before it gets better. And so my question for all of us listening this episode of God Talk is, what dysfunction are you settling for in your life? What dysfunction are you living in that God's calling you out of? He's offering you a promised land. He's offering you a better life, a better health, better job, better marriage, better relationship with your kids. Like, he's offering you all of, like, these different things, but you've got to be willing to follow him in faith and do what you know is right, so that when you come out on the other side of it, it will be better. It will be less dysfunctional. It will be much more healthy. But you see, you can't be scared of the process, because it's not going to feel good having that skin scraped. It's not going to feel good having that bullet dug out of you. But if you trust in God enough, and he's really calling you out of it, don't forsake the promised land. Don't forsake a life that's better, a life that he intends for you, that he wants for you, because you're too scared to go through the pain to get to that better place. Thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk, and I look forward to talking to you next week. God bless.